two parts. I say ch, you all echo ch, and the student says, I say in, the student says in, we put it together, chin. So that's the phonemic awareness. So you can see day one, I have her suggested only do half of those. And then the second day, day two, do the second half of them. Okay, so you're breaking that in half. The alphabet is the same. The activity was the mantra and letter detective. Y'all know the letter detective? That's the first student closes their eyes, second student takes one away, and then they guess which is missing. Okay, so the first day, just do the mantra. Second day, play letter detective. Okay? On to the reading deck. You will always do, until you're very advanced, always do both, all the letters in ARD, PRD. Okay? When it comes to spelling deck, practice all your sounds every day. You have to do that. When it comes to new introduction, so I had her do introduction of O the first day. Day two is a review. So then if I go to what do I have in reading, this is the closed syllable O, short O, and this is the second day, which is, the second part of the lessons with the K introduced. So I have them only reading this. This, I would have guessed these students would not have gotten through all these. Surprise me and say they did. They did, wow, very good. Okay, so if they get through it all, then either you have to create more words on your own, a second sheet, and if they didn't get through, then just have them go as far as they can. So that was day one and day two on that, and then spelling. Oh, sight words were, 10 through 20. So I had first 2 days, first day 1 through 10, and then second day 10 through 20, and just repeating that on day 3 and 4. It's just a review. And then spelling of the offerings that were given, I just did a shared lesson. And then, so I only gave closed syllable O on the first 2 days, and then added the K on the second 2 days. Okay, so there were offerings for both in the lesson, but I just broke them up. And if I needed a supplement, I just created one that was similar or something that I thought they would need. Okay, and then the reviews were first 2 days review of O, and the second day was the inclusion of cognates, and that was a review of the O, the K, and the concept of a cognate. So this is just my idea, and Jennifer's going to go over approaching a passage, so she may have more to say about, how you can spread a lesson out, or any thoughts on what I said, because it's just my opinion. Everybody's. We did hear from Alva, the one of the supervisors that teaches in the classroom. And here's a few things that she said, because we specifically said, what if you have kids missing? And she said, it's tricky when a student is absent. Here's how I handle it. If the group is just 2 little kids and one is missing, I will continue with the lesson or start another one the first day the child is absent. And she, I don't know if you know this, but the author of Language Foundations has additional binder with decodable texts. Most of them are what you are given in here, but there are a handful that are supplemental in that decodable text, but it's very expensive. It's like $50 a binder, and that's just for a level. So she was saying that she purchased one for her classroom because I don't know what grade she teaches, but she bought them for that.
She teaches, I think, 2 through 5 or 2 through 6.
So she purchased the binder for that appropriate class.
Do we get it through plastic?
No, get it through
Sandra, yeah, you can contact me and I'll,
Okay, because I'm teaching ESY and I'm thinking we're creating review lessons
Oh,
for
okay.
it, and I'm thinking rather than coming up with all the, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going
yeah.
to use the alphabetic phonics stuff
Yeah.
that I have, because it follows the
Exactly.
sequence obviously, but it'd be a lot more work to do that than have those already
oh, sure,
prepared.
yeah. Just get a, I
I
have a
just
card.
ordered through binders, so there's an email on top, you just write to her and she sends it to you.
Oh, okay. You want to
And
give,
She sends the invoice with the binder.
And then I would
you
know how
can
to get
just
it. Okay,
send
thanks.
back.
oh, okay. So you can get that information out?
I
Okay.
just got
Okay.
See if my department can pay for it. Yeah. So-
Okay, so she's saying if she has a larger group that she's instructing and the student misses, she does not have the time or the schedule to spend with that student. She says he misses what he misses. Okay.
Right.
So this is an example of one of the decodable texts. She sent it, and it's just like what we have in our binder. And I never ordered them myself when I was teaching. I think I felt that there were enough reading materials, and if I wanted to supplement, I could find something that I had on hand at home that I could use, or maybe that you've used in your classroom before.
Another thing that I run these lessons right now is I found, and I have those 4th and 5th graders, that bridge connections with the O really slowed them down when I got to spelling.
Absolutely.
So I had to stop and just do a whole section today on that. I mean, that's okay, right?
That's okay.
Right.
You do what you need to do.
Because that O
I
N
think
O
that's good
S.
judgment.
I thought it was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, this is
It's an
cool.
art form.
Yeah.
I have a question, like on lesson 13 when we teach NG,
Yeah.
to me, that's a one-day lesson because it's one concept and it's not particularly difficult. So I did it in one day, but then, and I saw me keep the stopwatch going because they love that, and I'm like, okay, and my thought was, when our time's up, we're moving on and they'll schedule, except for new material, because I think it's to mastery, they need to know it. So took one of the little boys a little bit longer to get, he just couldn't make the sound. So when we got to reading, we were down to not a lot of time to get reading and spelling in. So I had to make a decision. Do you think it's better to do the isolated words or to do this connected text? If I have to pick one or the other because we're moving on and they've got the concept,
For the student that's moving slower,
for the group, for the two of them.
or for both of them?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm coming towards the end of my schedule and I have to start cutting because they have to leave, I cannot keep them. So I made the decision to do one of these, just the first one, and then moved on to this. And how do you decide, if they've really mastered the material, and I know I don't need another day on the new material, how do I decide what to cut? Or do I do it again the next day and continue both pieces of the reading?
How are you convinced that they don't need the extra, that they already have mastered it? How are you?
Well, they seemed comfortable, and when I
determining
had them do this, they got it right away. And so I'm like, okay, we can keep going with this. And I actually let them pick, because I'm like, "Ah, guys, I'm making this up. We have more questions for Mrs. Edison. I mean, they're always giving me questions for you. I'm like, so they did this beautifully, they read it beautifully. And so I'm like, well, do you want to read the story or do you want to keep going with this because we don't have time for both? And they wanted to read the story. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go with what you're saying today. And we got about halfway through the story when we really had to move on to spelling. But what's the judgment call there? Because
Okay, I can give you my opinion, then you can give your own. I would say that you need a second day review and you need to cover all the reading. You need to convince yourself that it's mastered, and I don't see how you can convince yourself unless you've heard the full readings.
I would agree with that, and I would add on that you would want, you want to make sure you have connected text in every day. Yeah. So that might mean you read half the story.
But that differs from like your plan for the 4 days. of the
Yes,
lesson.
now, all that said, that's a specific situation for what, I just gave a huge example for Sherry's situation. Every situation's different, and your students will be different, so That's why I prefaced it by saying, these are severe kids that are moving slower and the time is limited. But I was just showing you how you can take one given lesson and you can divide it into 4. That's not saying that everybody here has to do this kind of lesson in 4 different days. You understand what I mean?
Well, that's just very confusing to me now, because then I'm going, okay, so which do I do? Do I do half, the top half, and half of the story the first day in order to get the connected text that you want every day? And then the next day, on day 2, I do the bottom half and the second half of the story? I mean,
You could do it that way.
Yeah.
Now I'm a little confused, because if there was 2, so a lot of the lessons I had to break in half if they had 2 skills. And so what Stephanie and I have either been doing, or other people that we've been talking about, and Stephanie's been ahead of me a little bit, and so we've been going to, just because it's nice to talk back and forth, and so we've made a new sheet, and Patty saw it, so I made a brand new sheet for one of, so I'm just making this up, let's say like 16 is O and K, okay? Well, there's no way that I can get O and K at the same. So we did O today, and then we came up with 9 words and then 6 sentences that he had to read, because I couldn't read the
So
passage.
there's your connected text.
Okay, because I couldn't read the K, because I hadn't introduced that passage for the K. And then what I've done the second day is gone back, done the exact same lesson, but then I went straight to then the words that were there and then the bigger passage. I didn't do, so my connected text, is it okay that I'm doing just sentences,
Your
not?
connected
That's
text could be a
another option.
phrase.
Okay,
I mean,
Okay, so I feel like also when you say connected text, I'm thinking.
I was
the
thinking
whole
the whole story.
No,
Okay,
no.
Words connected.
Words
Okay.
connected. Under the table, over the hill.
Okay.
In the breeze.
so then those
Connected.
sentences that we did was fine, and then we did the next
Yeah.
day.
I just mean not single words.
Okay.
Single words would be single words, connected text would be,
Okay, just wanted to make
Because
sure.
it's all
Doesn't have
working
to be-
towards decoding and fluency.
Right.
yeah. Because the connected text is supporting what the research says.
Right.
So that's a research.
And he does then slip up in those areas that it's interesting to see within, this might help Mary a little bit, at least for my 6th grader, he can read the single words, and then when he goes to the connected text with the sentences, he falls apart because he starts throwing in extra words. Like, I've had to stop him many times and say, stop reading the
This is not
sentence the
attending
way
to
that
text.
you think it should be read instead of the way it's actually written for you.
Because he's not attending.
And I like put, like throw my hands down, yep, no, 6th grade.
Sixth grade.
And cover the words, and I'm like, stop reading it. That you are making up words the whole way through because you just are looking at that first word. And so the first word will be like the ball, and he'll be like, the ball went down the hill, and I'm like,
Well, there's that impulsivity that goes along
Right,
with.
and he's
So-
not attending.
right, okay.
I mean, that, and that could be dyslexia, and that could be ADHD, and that could be.
And it's a little bit of both, but I think it's also, for me, I feel like, I see it's become a habit.
Right.
And so
That's
he's
great.
so
He's
used
so used
to doing that habit, is now we're working back almost 6 years of breaking a habit to say, stop guessing on what it is.
And that's what coding.
Where you are.
Yep. Mhm.
You want to hear the funniest thing? It's so cute that Jennifer Pafone, she's not here, I saw in her classroom. You know how our president has made this saying, no, fake news is ever so popular. She has no fake reading on a sign.
Oh, that's cute.
You don't hear that in every town.
It's 5 o'clock.
Apparently. Let's go. So that's a good segue into working at passage and fluency. So Maggie, what you were saying about your student who has trouble with connected text, some kids have trouble with isolated text. So it just depends on your student. This isn't, this is a program, and it definitely has procedures, and we have, we're following, and feel free to, Maria and Patty, jump in if you want to correct me on this.
Okay.
There's definitely procedures on this, but every kid that we're working with is going to be a little different. Somebody's going to have trouble with connected text, somebody's gonna have trouble with single word text. We just have to meet the students where they are and adjust the instruction to where they are. Whether it's 35 minutes, we only have 35 minutes, or we have 45 minutes, whatever it is, we just don't feel constrained to the program. I mean, you want to follow the procedures and you want to do what you're supposed to be doing, but relax a little bit and just do what's right for your student too. Would you guys agree with that? Absolutely. Yeah, you just want to be diagnostic in your teaching, I guess is what I'm saying. So that being said, there's a lot of questions on working a passage. And there was, that page 50 and suggested procedures for reading. You can't do this every single passage.
Okay.
There's just no way. You just wouldn't have enough time for every single passage. There's just no way. So you have to look at, so I just pulled story practice 29. So this is from lesson 29, the cliffhanging. So this is just taking a glance at this one. This is what I would do with this one. A lot of our kids don't go cliff climbing. So you would do some vocabulary work ahead of time. So is everyone clear on what a cold read, what they mean by a cold read, what she's, okay, so I won't go over that. So even before you're coding any of this, talking about working this Tuesday, look over the passage, code what's needed, that's just the actual looking at the words. Before I even do all that, I would take a look at this and pre-teach some vocabulary. A bobcat, I might have.
Before the cold read or after?
No, if you're doing if you're getting good data, if you need some data if you need your fluency data, cold read is just a cold read. I wouldn't do any pre-teaching of anything. So for a true cold read, you don't do any pre-teaching of anything. You just hand them the story, a 1 minute, and that's what this is pretty handy. Your words are right there for you. You don't have to calculate it. You don't have to count up the words for you.
Okay, I will warn everybody.
Check them out, double check them.
Double check them because a lot of them are not matching.
Okay.
I send Elva a message almost every day, and Maggie, story practice. Is it me? Are they not supposed to match? A lot of them are not matching. It may be one word.
Oh,
It may be
the
a
student copy
sentence
versus-
between the
yeah.
student copy and this copy.
Okay.
They're not matching. So as I'm on lesson 40, and I think there for several days, it was every day there was at least one word that didn't match, or a sentence or a phrase.
Okay.
So I will
So good to know.
warn everybody, please check them carefully.
Yeah. That kind of trips you up when you're.
Oh, yeah. and I had
What'd you say?
read one side and was like, okay, it's got all the skills, we're fine. Read the other side like the next day, didn't put them side by side, word by word. And he's in the middle of reading, I'm like, okay. And then I flipped over, it's like, oh, okay, this side he was reading from. So I will caution everybody.
Okay. Good to know. And
And
those are
she's
good
letting
things.
Sandy know
Yeah,
this
those
too.
are good things for us to let
Elva's letting Sandy know?
Mhm.
Sandy know, so she can change that in the next copy. So again, looking through this, some of our kids might not know what a bobcat is, or they might have a different definition of a bobcat. If their parents do construction work, they might think of that as a bobcat. So I would go, after the cold read, I would go through here. Kids can't decode words that they don't know the meaning of. So I would go through here and pull out a thick mist. I might talk about what a thick mist would be. What's another word for a thick mist? Fog. He talks about, he skids on a damp rock. I would talk about a mossy rock, do some visualization, which is all in the Thursday practice about visualizing, summarizing. That's all going to lead into that Thursday piece. Again, you're not going to do that every single time. And some stories are going to lend themselves better to do that. Some of the stories are really simple, and you're not going to get a lot of meat out of them. So you're going to be stretching to full vocabulary. Don't do that then. Don't use that story for that. Don't take data on that story. Or just take the data and don't do vocabulary. It really is just going to depend on your student and their background knowledge and what you need the data for. But don't be a slave to the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
You can't be.
You can't be. You're just not going to be able to
Because
do
if
it
you're,
all.
you're doing 2 lessons a
Right.
week and both of them have passage, you can't do that.
Right, right.
Okay, that's good to know, so you don't have to do a cold read and 3 practices on every story. 'Cause
No.
I'm having a heck of a
That's
time with
good.
3 in a group.
That was
This
my
is like-
first question.
Oh.
No, you can't do it.
It's
You have to
hard.
be able to do it, no. But one thing I do if I'm gonna expect my student to read this whole thing, I am gonna take 15 seconds to scan it myself and make sure there aren't any words in here that my student isn't going to really struggle with.
And I have an EL student, and he asks me like what every word means, and we do.
Right.
What is docking? What is it?
Yeah, and you might have I have a visual dictionary that I have the baseball card sleeves. So I print little pictures of things and I put in the baseball card sleeves of haggis. SIS people would understand what. I mean, who knows what haggis is? Why would you want to know what haggis is? But it's one of our words that we use for decoding. And anyway, so you might want to keep like a little file box of pictures that you can zip through to show your EL, your EL student what a bobcat is. What moss is when he's talking about the damp rock. They have he talks about the gang of kids are at the cliff. They have tent pegs. If you've never gone camping, you don't know what tent pegs are. So again, this is just one of the stories I pulled that happened to have some words that would depend on background knowledge if you didn't know what it was. And then if you know that your student really struggles with G curve N, thanks, you might want to have them code that word. Now, if your student, jumping to the fluency side, if your student is struggling with fluency, that she was asking about, do I have students code every word? If they need to code every word in a story, have them code every word. If they're tripping up on every 3rd word, then they need to be coding every word. They shouldn't be tripping up on every 3rd word. That's an indication that you're going too fast because they're not mastering the material, and they probably shouldn't be on this story if they're tripping up on every 3rd word. Or they're supposed to silently, I'm going to go back to this side, they're supposed to be silently preparing this page. So silently preparing this page, they're supposed to be scanning through to see what words they need to code. Some of them might be too young for that concept, and they might not understand what that means. So maybe you do a think aloud instead of a silent read. Okay, tell me why you're coding this word. Think aloud instead of doing it in your head. And then you model that. I'm coding hunting because it has suffix ing. And I know that suffix ing is a suffix I leave off often. So I'm going to code suffix ing. So model that think aloud for them and really teach them what it means to prepare, silently prepare. Because what I was seeing was, they would silently prepare and they were going like this. I was like, you are very fast preparers. And then they were making errors. So they were not really internalizing what preparing was. So that they were kind of skipping over that step. And, who wouldn't if you
Well, just, we need
speed
to.
along? Okay, speed along. So what other questions do you have about the working of the passage piece? All right, so this piece would be a great, so the skill of visualizing, visualizing somebody hanging from a cliff, that would work itself well if you wanted to work that skill into this passage. Some of them not so much. It would be a stretch. So you can't do that every single time. So pick your battles with your passages. Any other questions about working a passage?
I guess I'm just having I've been trying to do the cold reads and hot reads, like I said before, and, when I talked to Patty, she said look for improvement. But my kids are we're only timing for a minute, and I'm on only lesson 16, so the passages are short, so I don't really know how to show improvement between the first and last read, because some passages have, maybe 58 words, and the next one has 38 words, and we're only looking at timing for 1 minute, and we're not looking at how many words, I mean, we're looking at how many words they're getting correct, but they're pretty much not missing anything. Do I even need to bother with the hot read, you know what I mean? Say, get them all right the first time? Because we're not timing the time, you know what I
If
mean?
they're not gonna get any, if they're not getting
Exactly.
anything
Oh, they
wrong, I
think it's a
wouldn't.
cool thing. They're like, how many seconds did I do that? You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not really doing that. You know,
Right,
but
yeah, I mean, if they're not getting anything wrong,
just let it go.
yeah, then I wouldn't do a post-read.
Yeah. Okay, see, I'm trying to follow.
Yeah, don't
It is not
try,
working.
yeah,
Okay.
don't do that. I wouldn't, don't be a slave to,
Okay, that's. I
These are
am.
suggestions.
I've become a slave.
yeah.
Jennifer,
Yes.
can you, I'm embarrassed to ask this, but I have to. I missed somehow that we were timing it for a minute. But am I trying to get a words per minute?
So a
number?
yeah, so you would do, so to get a fluency,
Uh-huh.
you would,
I want to see the math. That's what I need to see.
So you time per
If that
minute.
took 1 minute and 3 seconds, that would
you would
mean-
stop them, so you time per minute.
Uh-huh,
Say they got to this word right here.
uh-huh.
You count back, so 59 words.
Uh-huh.
And that, so it would be 59 words, correct?
So I
But then I
missed the
take out-
timing it for a
yeah.
minute part, which was really throwing me for a loop
Right.
with math.
So then, and then you subtract the words that they got wrong to get your
Okay.
words correct per minute.
Right, okay, that's so much simpler.
Good.
I don't know how I missed that, but I did, and I was like, I don't know how to figure out the words per minute for 1 minute and 3 seconds. or-
And then you can look at your Tinsdale and Hasbrook fluency chart, but we know these kids are behind, so I wouldn't even bother with that either.
Okay.
You know, we know that they're in their intervention for a reason. They're not gonna be meeting their fluency goals. So you can look at it to get a gauge to see how far behind they are. You might wanna look at it, but it's not gonna be,
Okay.
they're gonna be behind.
Yeah, the 1 minute thing, I don't know how I missed that, but I missed that somehow in the beginning.
That's
So I've
okay.
timed them, and I have all the
Right,
records
and that's why
of
the
that,
numbers
but-
are here, so it's easily counted, so you don't have to count all the words.
Unless they're not. Gotcha.
All right, any other questions about that?
Thank you, that was helpful.
Sure.
Yeah, it was.
Real quick, I just gave you some suggestions for correcting reading errors. I'll pass these out to you. So when you get to some of the kids were, getting to a word and some of the teachers were asking, okay, what do I do when I get to an error? When a kid makes an error, do I correct it for them? Do I read it for them? So I just kind of gave a little chart about correcting what kind of errors they're making, whether it's a single letter error, whether it's adding sounds, deleting sounds, false starts. Again, this is a suggestion. Don't feel like you have to have cue cards for this, but these are suggestions. These are some of the things we do when we get in errors. So for example, if the word is tap and the student says top, you might have them name the letters. That would be, then they realize, okay, I said the wrong vowel sound, teacher points to the vowel, okay, so then they realize that might be self-correcting. If they still don't get it, have them point to the vowel, give them the keyword and sound, have them give the keyword and sound, and then the teacher can ask them to blend through and pause for the vowel and finish. Or you can have them write over the vowel with a print, write over cursive and print, which is very effective, and they can sound as they're writing over cursive and print. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? So that's helpful. You can do that with a whole word, you can do that with just one letter, but that's helpful for correcting errors there. If they're adding a sound, again, have them name the letters. If the word is sap and they say slipped, often they'll pick it up that, okay, there's no L in the word. Deleting, adding, deleting, and substituting sounds. False starts, self-corrections, and sounding each letter are all errors. So when they're self-correcting, there is a glitch. So even though they're self-correcting, there is a glitch. You can say, I'll fight you on this one. You can tell me, but they're self-correcting. There's a glitch. There's something wrong. If they're saying pat, pot, pot, pat, pot, it's pot, it's pot, it's definitely pot. Something's wrong. Something's going on up here. It's an error. They're not mastering. So if they're doing that a lot, I don't care if they're correcting it,
They're not mastering the material. There's a glitch in the system.
So you're counting it then as a mistake when
You
Add
should
up
be
your-
counting it.
When you do the passages, the
Yep.
fluency readings.
The word should just come out.
It should be
It
fluid.
should just come out. So when
Right.
they're botching it up each time, but then
Right.
it's correct at the end, it's still wrong.
Correct. Because if you're doing that through a whole passage,
Yeah, blah, blah, blah,
how are
blah,
you
blah,
gonna
blah, blah.
comprehend
Yeah,
by
you're
the
not.
end? You're
Yes.
not gonna be able to comprehend.
No, you're right.
That being
Some
said,
sections are.
also, if you're saying at, pat, that's an error. You can't read fluently that way either.
Oh.
So even if they self-correct, you're counting it as an error.
Yes. Yeah. You can't have, you can't do that.
What about repetitions, if they're repeating a word or a section of
Yeah.
text? I can read well, but it's just like an impulsive habit kind of thing.
You have to break that because it's also an error.
So
Because it
okay,
interferes
I
with,
did count wrong, I just
yeah.
wasn't sure if I should have.
It interferes with fluency, self-correction. I'm also passing around some cursive, I think we sent those to you guys, but yeah, this is awesome. Okay. Sorry, I hope I didn't take up all.
Yeah, thank you.
Give her your thing.
Yep, oh, thank you.
No, she just made it into the one.
Oh,
yeah, that's good. Okay.
Just a quick reference.
So I'll be talking about sight words and you give these out.
That's just.
And I just compare it and I come to this question. What are sight words? Sight words are words that don't conform to the regular spelling. And therefore they cannot be spelled by matching the sounds with the letters that represent that sound. Let me give you an example. This is a diagram. But then this is an open vowel sound, so it should be D, but it's not D. You know it's. So therefore, this is a learned word, it's a sight word.